and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Samantha Hawley. Is it a mammoth failing in Australia's border security or a highly unusual once-off event? The answer depends on who you talk to, but authorities are investigating how a boat of Sri Lankan asylum seekers made it all the way to the Geraldton harbour without being detected. It's the first time in 5 years an asylum boat has made it to the mainland, and political debate is fierce.
It just gets worse and worse all the time, and I think effectively the government has kind of surrendered. And the problem with surrendering on boat people is that in the end it discredits the whole of our immigration program, and that is a tragedy, an absolute tragedy.
I've asked Customs and Border Protection to review the circumstances of this case and advise me whether there needs to be changes to the way in which we patrol the seas in the northwest. But the sort of language that we've heard from Tony Abbott is not helpful. It's indicative of the bigger problem with this debate.
To discuss this issue and others, I'm joined now by the Liberal MP Don Randall, who's in Perth, and the Labor MP Ed Husic in Sydney. Welcome to both of you.
Afternoon.
Yeah, hi Samantha, hi Ed.
Very well. I'll go to you first, Don Randall. Pretty emotive language from the opposition leader that we heard there. We're not at war, are we?
No, but Samantha, this is a clear failure of the integrity of the immigration system that the Labor Party are presiding over in Australia at the moment. It's not just that one boatload has reached Geraldton, it's the fact that we've got now 4,500 people, over 270 boats. This is a clear failure of policy. If you recall, Julia Gillard said as Shadow Immigration Minister, when one boat came during the Howard era, another boat, another policy failure. This is a total breakdown of the Labor Party's immigration policy as to asylum seekers, and our borders are now being infiltrated 2 or 3 times a day sometimes, certainly weekly, and the people have had enough and they want some integrity and some decency brought back into our immigration system so that we can actually know who arrives here and make sure that we assess who comes into our country.
Ed Husic in Sydney, what do you make of it? Is it embarrassing, I guess, for the government that a boat came so close to the shoreline in Geraldton?
Well, Don and the opposition try to characterise the 2 boats that have arrived as a massive policy failure. Well, if that's the case, what happened with the 19 that reached the mainland under the Howard government? I mean,
well, that was before the Pacific Solution time, so it's that needs to be put into context.
Well, hang on a second. Well, hang on a second, Samantha. I mean, you didn't interrupt Don, so give me a chance to talk through from my side of the story. I mean, the fact of the matter is, there's 19 boats that got through under them, and what I don't want to hear, and I certainly don't want to witness, is the crocodile tears coming from the other side of the political divide, where we had a policy to try and really clamp down on these arrivals by putting in place an agreement with Malaysia that would stop having an attraction of people smugglers getting people to Australia. And the other side of politics, for political reasons, for their own political benefit, refused to agree to that agreement. They put all sorts of confected ideas up as to why they didn't, for example, saying Malaysia's not a signatory to the Refugee Convention, yet at the same time want to effectively have an agreement with Indonesia that would see a policy the Indonesians don't want, turning back boats to Indonesia, which, surprise, surprise, isn't a signatory. So if they're fair income about it, they'll allow us to have the Malaysia agreement go through to smash the demand that people smugglers are creating.
Well, Don Randall, it's true, isn't it, that that boat could have got through on anyone's watch. It wouldn't have mattered what policy government had in place. These things do happen. This is the first time in 5 years, in fact, that a boat has reached the mainland.
That's correct, Samantha. Look, but let me just say 2 things. One is Ed needs to be quite clear with us. This is not the case. There was legislation which came to the Parliament which the Labor Party then wouldn't proceed with. In terms of excising the Australian mainland, there is legislation currently sitting in the Senate and the Labor Party won't deal with that. This could all be dealt with, but the Labor Party are not serious about border integrity, and if Ed wants to defend this shambolic policy and process, the people of Penrith and his electorate will judge him harshly.
Well, Ed Husic, I will ask you about that. There is legislation before the Senate at the moment to excise the Australian mainland, a policy that your party obviously agrees with. Why has that not been before the Senate? I mean, has the government been dragging the chain here, in a sense?
Well, great question. And when Don makes the statement that it's sitting in the Senate, there's a good reason for that, and that is that the opposition, again, for politics,
we support it.
Will not go ahead and help us get that through. Another correction too is Don, that Penrith is not in my I'm very happy that Penrith is nearby, but it's not the electorate, not in the electorate that I represent. Bottom line is...
Husic, sorry, I will cut in there though, because Ed Husic, the opposition does support that legislation. So the legislation could pass. Why hasn't it been put forward?
I mean, we've put it forward through in the lower house and had that go through. And so if the opposition are saying that they'll support it, then well and good. And at the next sittings, I imagine that it'll be put. And it is important that it does happen, because the type of situations that we have here will ensure, as part of the Houston report, that the recommendations that were brought down in that allows no advantage to be gained by reaching the mainland. But the other element of the Houston report is that we allowed for Manus to occur, Manus Island to have a processing ability. We also allowed for Nauru to process, and the other important element of it too was that Malaysia would proceed under that agreement too.
All right, well, let's move on to
Samantha, on Malaysia, can I just say that the 800 people
just
in
briefly,
the 800 for 4,000 swap would have been filled this month alone. So it's a silly idea.
No, it's not. Well, I mean, look, the assumption there is that you've given it no chance to actually operate, and to, as we saw, based on intelligence reports coming out of Indonesia, the demand dropped, and people were going to the boats, people smugglers saying, give us our money back.
OK, well, let's move on from that issue onto another matter. The Treasurer, Wayne Swan, has sent a very strong warning shot this afternoon about the pressures on the Australian economy ahead of releasing his budget in May. Let's hear what he had to say at a Sydney lunch.
We're seeing the global economy take a sledgehammer to our budget revenues, wiping off more than $160 billion since the GFC started. And as I've said a number of times, the high dollar and difficult global conditions are contributing to subdued price pressures across the board, which have hit profitability, and as a result, we're seeing further hits to revenues, and it is clear this will be felt right across the forward estimates.
Well, to you first, Ed Husic, should we expect that we won't see any budget surplus in the forward estimates?
Well, I think we've already outlined in December that it would be, in this environment, it would be exceptionally difficult to reach surplus, where revenues have, as the Treasurer has indicated, tanked by about to the tune of $160 billion.
So, but in the forward estimates, when we see the budget, will we see a surplus or will we not?
And so in the volatility, like what we've had over the course of the last 12 months, in terms of global economic conditions being as volatile as they are, including the impact of the high dollar on our own economy as well, it's very hard to reach a surplus in that environment unless you're wanting to cut savagely into government expenditure and have an impact on families here. So what we've said is, look, we can't hold on to a surplus objective in that type of environment.
So we could see successive deficits, is what you're saying?
I think I'd be very careful about making predictions given the volatility of the economic environment. And it is such a volatile environment too that the opposition, having gone from a commitment to have a surplus within the first year of office, has now moved away from that, realistically assessing that, as I said, those economic conditions just are pounding revenue.
Right, Don Randall, to you. It's reported today that the Coalition is considering cutting assistance to the car industry to help save some money. Do you think that's a good move?
Well, look, just let me refer to Wayne Swan, though. He is softening up the Australian people to tell them the sad news that he isn't going to be able to deliver a surplus, not this year, after saying he would by come hell or high water, and in the forward years and the forward estimates. So we know that their management of the Australian economy is shambolic at best, but in terms of the car industry, it's now been estimated that all the money that's been put into subsidising Holden and others over the last 12 years has basically been the profit line that they've come forward on. And at the end of the day, if the Australian people want to subsidise a local car industry that is actually costing them more than it necessarily should to own a car, it has to be looked at seriously. You know, we're about, responsible management of the Australian taxpayers' money, not throwing good money after bad has been happening with some of the car manufacturers. Look at the case of Mitsubishi,
Yeah.
where we gave them all that money and then they took it and went and they left.
But remove all the government assistance, Don Randall, and surely we'll see many, many more jobs go.
Well, look, we've got to do what we do smarter and what we do better. And that sometimes means that we can't be a textile manufacturer because we compete with labour force issues overseas and supply. And the same story with cars. We've got to look seriously. You know, Senator Button did it many years ago, and he had to make some clear decisions on behalf of the Australian government then. We've got to make responsible decisions ourselves about what we do in terms of, you know, wantonly spending Australian taxpayers' money.
All right, well, let's just move...
Well, Senator Button had in his heart the concept of strong industries providing jobs for Australians, Don, and I can tell you what, Sophie Mirabella is no Senator Button, that's for sure.
All right, well...
that's right, she's just as responsible, though, about our economy.
All right, well, on that point, we'll move on to another issue. Of course, the Coalition's NBN policy is still creating a bit of debate today. Experts seem to be divided on the worthiness of that policy. First to you, Ed Husic. I guess now what we have is a Liberal NBN policy and a Labor NBN policy. Do you think that this, in a sense, neutralises the issue ahead of the election, that people now see that both parties have an NBN policy? It might actually neutralise it.
No, I think everyone's scratching their heads in disbelief that you could actually conceivably put forward this policy as serious policy. You know, data production, the generation of data is set to explode. Worldwide, you'll see data growth 44 times higher in 2020 than 2009. So you need a platform to accommodate for that. What we've done in terms of having, you know, a combination of fibre, wireless and satellite is to be able to position the Australian economy, the Australian community for that data growth as we digitise more of our lives. The opposition want to shift us into a lower gear. They want to deliver something that will mean lower speeds, higher cost, will disconnect 9 million Australians, and we'll see regional Australia pay more instead of us reaching a position where we're trying to have uniform pricing and access regardless of where you live. Their policy will see slower internet and will impact on the economy's ability to deal with this growth in data.
Well, Don Randall, I assume that you disagree with all of that, but I wanted...
Well, look, he's reading from the Labor Party notes, obviously. Let me just point out, Samantha, that in Western Australia, where I sit, there has not been one NBN connection in this state yet, and that's the slowness of the rollout. We want to do something about it. We want to actually get it out sooner, and we want to give access to more people. I have an out on Metropolitan electorate seat, and people are there still on dial-up. We want them to get onto this as soon as possible.
Because and that's scandalous. Like, Don, that's scandalous. We should not be having dial-up in this country. We should be modernising our network. That's what I said, Ed. Our network should be modernised. Now, you guys tried 19 times to fix it and couldn't.
Well, gentlemen, I will let you...
We've just put our policy out, and we're going to do that.
OK, well, I will let you finish that debate a little later on in private.
Stay online, Don.
But we are out of time for today. That is Capitol Hill for today. Thank you, Ed Husic and Don Randall, and we'll see you all again tomorrow.